This is the Game Changers Experience. Deep dive conversations with leading business disruptors, Olympic athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers from around the world. This show will teach you insights about the winning principles in mindset, productivity, marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, business strategy, and more. Hosted by productivity authority, business strategist, former elite athlete, author, and public speaker, Adam Strong.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Game Changers Experience with myself, Adam Strong. And today we have an amazing guest, which was introduced to me, and his name is Andy Paul. Now, Andy is a 2-time best-selling author. He's ranked the number 8 LinkedIn list of top 50 global sales experts and consulted with some of the biggest, largest companies in the world, and such as Square and Philips and GrabHug and many more. Andy's also got a hit podcast, or had a hit podcast called Accelerate Your Sales Podcast, which was acquired by Ring DNA in 2020 and has since renamed it Sales Enablement with Andy Paul. And I'm looking forward to today's conversations because some of the things that we're going to be talking about is not just about sales, but we're going to be talking a little bit about psychology. We're going to be talking a little bit about neuroscience, which is very in vogue of today. We're going to be talking about some of the questions that you guys need to be asking on your offline and online conversations, how you can increase your conversions, and how do you deal with those awkward conversations or knowing when to ask the right questions at the right time. So without further ado, Andy, welcome to the show.
Adam, thank you very much for having me.
Very cool. So listen, I know that I always like to get our guests to kind of give us a little bit of a backstory, I suppose, because I remember reading your bio on LinkedIn. It was really interesting. And I remember, I think it was on LinkedIn or your website, and it said something about when you went for a sales job or whatever it is, they told you that you just weren't salesy enough in order to get the position or whatever it is. and when we think of the word salesy, it's like, oh, and I'm sure that there have been many experiences for a lot of our listeners, and we think of the word sales, they've had a bad experience, and generally, right, that's what it normally boils down to, doesn't it? But please tell us a little bit more.
Sure. Well, actually, that's part of a story I tell in my latest book, Sell Without Selling Out. And yeah, it's just when I got back from my first, straight out of college, I went to work for this really big tech company at the time, and second largest computer company in the world at that time. And they had these very formal structured training programs that we went to as new hires. And at the end of the 2-week training course, the instructor sent back an evaluation to my boss, basically saying, yeah, get rid of this guy. Never gonna make it in sales. He's too analytical. Asked too many questions, blah, blah, blah. It just sort of wasn't the stereotypical extroverted sales personality. And yeah, at that moment I said, well, geez, I either need a way to figure this out or I'm gonna have a very short career.
So did you always wanted to go in sales just out of curiosity?
No. Okay. No, it's sort of like many people, sort of a fallback position with no real plan when I graduated from university about what I was going to do, and sort of kicked around for a couple of months after I graduated. And then the expectation was from my parents and myself, I guess, as well, that I should get a job. And a lot of the big tech companies were on campus recruiting. And so, yeah, I just sort of seemed to be what people wanted. And so I went out and interviewed a bunch for it.
Interesting. I mean, you've gone leaps and bounds now. You've turned what your so-called weakness was, which was way back then, into kind of a strength now, which is really interesting. How was it? How was that? I mean, I know that's been over a space of 25 years or so, or more.
Quite a bit longer, but yes.
By the way, just for the audience, that he's still 21, just to let you know.
Yes, thank you.
But tell us a little bit more how you kind of pivoted well, I wouldn't say pivoted, but reinvented yourself to turn yourself into kind of the so-called sales expert and one of the world's leading positioning authorities in sales. And what was the kind of lead up to the journey? Was it through corporates and kind of the conventional job sort of route, or was it going straight into running your own business?
Oh no, it was yeah, 25 years of working for other companies. But yeah, I wasn't really pivoting. I mean, it was really staying true to myself. That was really the thing that was my path, and that I write about in my book, is that if there are 5 million salespeople in the world, there are 5 million different ways to sell. And it's really the job of leadership within sales, within companies, help develop people to become the best version of themselves. And so I was fortunate early in my career to work with managers who, gave me enough rope and leeway to go out and experiment and try different things, because I wasn't the conventional sales personality type, and try different things and find out what worked for me. And that really just set me on this path of saying, okay, I'm always going to be more successful if I think I'm selling in a way that's aligned with who I am, my character, my values, and so on. And that's what I've done throughout my entire career. It's what I, urge people to do, and all the content that I produce is it's not complying to somebody else's vision of what a salesperson is, but who you are and what your unique strengths are as a human being, and how do you amplify those to be able to help your buyers.
Yep. Love it. Very cool. Now I want to get straight into the deep end here, because I know we're going to be going into some very thought-provoking, I suppose, questions and exercises, which I'd love to talk to you a little bit about. But let's go straight into some of the sales aspects of not just some of the things that you've written in your book or books, but also I want to go straight into some of what you've identified in your latest book, which was called the 4 Selling Pillars. What are they, and how can they be applied for running your own business, if you may?
Sure. Well, so my book, Sell Without Selling Out, I define sort of 2 primary modes of operation people fall into when they're selling, whether it's a salesperson or you're a business owner or what have you, and you're marketing your products, which is one is selling out, which is the stereotypical sales behavior that you described earlier so accurately, is that people instinctively resist. That's selling out. That's putting your own interest ahead of those of the buyer. The opposite of that I describe in detail in the book is called selling in, and it's based on 4 innate human characteristics we all possess, which is connection, curiosity, understanding, and generosity. Meaning is that we're wired to want to connect with other people. And through this connection and through this rapport we build with people, that opens the door to us building trust with somebody. And trust becomes so important because as we move through a process with a potential buyer of our product, we need to have permission to ask them certain questions that they wouldn't normally answer, right? Absent trust, you might get some superficial answers, but you want to earn the right to really stick your nose into your buyer's business, because if you do that, then you'll develop a better understanding of the things that are most important to them and the ways that you can help them achieve those, which is really your goal as a seller. My goal as a seller is not to persuade you to buy my product. It's to listen to you and understand the things that truly are most important to you in terms of the challenges you face and the outcomes you want to achieve by addressing those challenges. And then I want to help you get that. And so helping you get that is being generous, right? If I give of myself to help you achieve something important to you, selling done well is the ultimate act of generosity. So it's really these 4 innate human behaviors that form the basis for successful selling, successful relationships in multiple dimensions, successful collaborations.
Very cool. Now, where does the belief come into this 4-step pillar? Would that come before connection? Where would that come in, Andy?
Belief in yourself?
Yeah.
Well, I think that, I mean, it is part of your makeup, right? I mean, confidence is important. Belief is important. But it's sort of addressed in a couple of areas in the book. One is in this pillar of curiosity, is you can't be afraid to ask questions. So one of the things that holds many people back in life in general, and sales in particular, is they're afraid to ask questions because they're afraid it'll be exposed what they don't know. right? That the nature of the question will illuminate somehow that, oh, you misunderstand something or you just don't understand something. And people don't want to be put in that position oftentimes. So you need to have the confidence to be able to ask questions, right? You don't need to know everything in advance. That's part of the reason you're there, is to ask questions and to learn.
Yeah.
But if you're selling something to somebody, is if you're truly and sincerely interested in them, then your questions will be welcome. You know, even as I was a rookie salesperson and knew nothing about anything, business, computers, I had CEOs of companies willingly spend a fair amount of time with me to answer my questions. That was basically my business degree I was getting my first couple of years in sales. But it's because I was sincere in the questions I was asking. You know, I was there to learn. I wasn't being gratuitous. I wasn't being self-interested. And when you're in that environment, people will give you time.
Interesting. Yeah, really interesting. I love that. Very cool. Now, one thing that fascinates me more than anything else, which I feel is probably one of those subjects which I feel probably isn't spoken about enough, which is understanding the psychology of the buyer itself. Which, you know, I mean, yes, we could talk about neuroscience, we could talk about dealing with people's objections, but actually it's much more than that, isn't it? Do you feel, I mean, from your perspective, how can we as business owners and entrepreneurs, how can we get a better understanding of the psychology of our buyers? What do you recommend, and where do we seek?
Well, I think that, yeah, you have to read widely in any event, right? As an entrepreneur, a business owner, is people used to ask me when I was stage of my career, I was doing a lot of small business consulting. They'd say, well, how'd you choose your clients? And I said, well, I'd go into the CEO's office and I would look at how big of a stack of books did they have on their desk. And those that had a big stack of books, I knew we were going to get along very well and be able to do well together. Those that didn't have a big stack of books, therefore probably weren't very curious. Yeah, that wasn't going to be a client for me. So this ability to keep reading widely is important. You know, when you talk about psychology of buyers, I mean, there's been so much work done, behavioral economics and social psychology and so on. It's an interesting field because the goalposts move constantly as we continue to learn more about the human brain and how people think and so on. There are no givens oftentimes. I mean, one example is, for years, this idea of loss aversion was hugely important. It's one of the tenets of behavioral psychology and decision making was that people more readily invest, avoid a loss than achieve a gain. But new research came out just the last couple of years saying maybe not so much. Maybe that's a fallacy. And okay, great. But you may find through your own experience that maybe your customers deal one way or another. Maybe they are a little more loss averse, because nothing is 100%. And so all these things you read about, about reciprocity and influence and so on, that these tests social psychologists do, they're not saying that 100% of people act this way. They're saying, we did a study and 60% of people predictably acted in a certain way in response to a particular stimulus. Well, keep that in mind. It's not 100%. You're going to come across people that aren't necessarily that way. But it's really important, I think, to ground yourself in as much of that as you can, because it's not just all about you. There's selling and buying as a two-way street. So I like reading books about that. Behavioral economics, social psychology, economics, just to sort of give me some insight into what people are thinking.
Yeah, that's cool. Very good. Interestingly enough, over the last couple of years has been quite interesting for a lot of companies. I mean, because you've been in sales for quite forever and ever. And how do you feel sales has changed over the last couple of years, especially as we're kind of moving more into what we call the digital revolution now, and how people's behaviors and the way the touch points work and things like that? How do you feel sales has changed over the last couple of years, and how can we adapt to kind of the new ways of working in terms of digital ways?
Well, I think you sort of need to separate sort of the process from the act of buying itself, because I think that humans as a species, we haven't changed in the last 2 years. We haven't evolved that quickly. The way we gather information and process information and use that to make decisions is still the same. The mechanisms have changed, right? The way we communicate with people have changed. But the way that we, as I write about in my book, the way we connect with people, the way we influence other people's, that's still the same. So at one level, it hasn't changed at all. But the way you get there has changed, right? Is sure, we're not as in person as often as we were before. So we need to, perhaps for many sellers, doing things more things virtually than they did previously. All right, well, that has an impact somewhat in terms of, you're not in a room with someone, so you can't interpret the body language the same, let's say, as do our remotely. So certain accommodations you have to make, and certain ways you have to sort of think a little more clearly and slowly, perhaps, than you did before. Not rush to assumptions. But I think people sort of do themselves a disservice, say, well, everything's changed. No, the ways in which you and I are going to communicate, that, the media we use, that's changed.
Sure.
But if you're the buyer, you really haven't changed. So the same basics exist, which is, at the end of the day, and there's been multiple research studies on this, when buyers make decisions, whether this is a consumer purchase or it's a business purchase, is a majority of the factors taken into account in the decision making have to do with the experience with the salesperson or the experience with the seller.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if anything, you have to, I think that's becoming more important as more automation comes into the buying and selling. The part that's left, that is the human to human part of it, actually becomes more important. So the ability to really bring your A game every time you interact with a buyer really becomes more important. So there's no unimportant sales touches these days.
Do you think that, especially over the years, I mean, I know there's been some research out there that says the average amount of touch points, or I would say average touch points, that happens between coming in contact with someone for the first time to the end of the sale, or when the sale actually commences, if you like, or when they make a decision, was around 6 times, maybe 10 years ago. Do you feel that has increased over the years? And I know there's been sort of wildly some wild figures out there. Some of them are saying 12 touch points. Some of them are saying 10 touch points. What is a touch point, and what defines? I just wanted to put it out there because.
Yeah, there's no real clear-cut answer. So there's been a lot of studies done about how many times do you have to reach out to a new prospect before you actually talk to them for the first time. So that's one set of studies and numbers. And that says, depending on what you believe, it's a pretty wide range, 12 to 20, meaning phone calls, email attempts, message attempts, whether you're using text, is to try to reach somebody before you get them to speak with you for the first time. Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, it's not unusual. That could be the case. During the sales process itself, once you've somebody engaged in their interest and saying, we're in this process together, I would say there's probably more interactions or attempted interactions between sellers and buyers, just because compared to 15, 20 years ago, because there's so many more ways to contact people, right? Email and messaging and so on. And I think sellers actually lean into that too much, probably, because there's a lot of gratuitous outreach attempts. And again, there's another issue I write about in the book is you have to understand is that when you're trying to reach a buyer, what you're asking them to do is invest time in you. And when people make an investment, what do they want? They want a return on that time. So if you're doing a lot of just sort of, hey, just checking in to see what's happening, with your type outreach to customers and touch points, you're wasting their time, right? You're just, what value are they getting from that?
Right.
So you have to be very intentional these days. And so I think perhaps in some cases, resist the temptation to outreach to a buyer, to message them. And the basic standard is, hey, if as a result of interacting with me, the buyer is not closer to making a decision after that interaction than they were before, then it had no value for them. Yeah. It's pretty simple. So you as a seller can anticipate exactly what they'll be in advance, is based on your intent. What's my intent? What does the buyer need from me right now in order to make progress toward making a decision? What do I need to do to make that happen? Well, that has to be your thought in mind as a, if you're the frontline salesperson, or if you're the CEO who's doing selling or whatever, what in this interaction is going to help the buyer move closer to making a decision? If you don't know the answers to that, don't do it.
Right.
And it's really hard for sellers. What do you mean? I'm not supposed to reach out? And it's like, yeah, don't consume their time unless they're going to earn a return on that time.
I suppose, I don't know, maybe people feel like they feel the need to, or they feel pressured. I don't know. It could be, or I don't know, whatever the scenario or reason might be.
Well, sales hates a vacuum. So salespeople hate a vacuum. So in the absence of information and stimuli, they want to go out and create some. And yeah, unless there's a level of intention behind it that says, yeah, this outreach, this contact point, this sales touch, I like to call it, this sales touch is going to help the buyer make progress toward making a decision. If it's not going to, don't do it.
Yep. Love it. Very cool. Interestingly enough, this actually beautifully moves into, because I picked up some great golden nuggets from what you said there. And I know that when we're having a sales conversation, whether it be face-to-face, online, whichever it might be, and for whatever reason, I believe sales is also about timing. Some people are not ready to make a decision, or they might not be ready to move forwards, right? And you can concur with that. But if someone is in a position where they're not quite there yet, they're not quite over the line, but maybe a business owner or a business leader had them in the back of their mind, and they want to, what's the word I'm looking, reignite a conversation, should we say, whether it be 3 months ago, 6 months ago, whatever it might be. How should one approach reigniting that conversation? What should we say in that conversation? And how long should we leave it for? $1 million question, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one answer to any of those questions. But I think that if you've been talking with someone and they said, look, timing's just not right. Okay. I mean, we're maybe 3 to 6 months away. Contact me again at that point. I mean, that's one thing to start, is when you have that last conversation, is you reach agreement on when you should reach out to them. And then you might also say, look, in the meantime, would you mind if I continue to send you information that might be relevant to this, potential change you're looking at making? And it's very easy these days with, email tools, is to set a little sequence up to drip information to the potential buyer and to keep them informed. You just have to make sure that, again, the same lesson as before, is that it's going to be worth their time, right? To read whatever you send. So if you're just putting them on a standard email drip campaign from your marketing department and it's all, sell type content, that's not going to be useful. But if it's content that, again, relates to the decision they have to make, then sure, do it. And just like I said, just make sure it's good, because as we know, we're competing for tiny slices of the buyer's attention with thousands of other sources of information. They're going to devote their time to those sources of information. They're going to get a return on investment. I mean, there's actually a study that was done this by Herbert Simon, Nobel Prize winning economist back, I think in the early 70s. Even before the internet, and he was forecasting this time. He said, when we were going to be inundated, he was basically forecasting the internet before it existed. He said, we'll be inundated with all these sources of information contending for a slice of our attention. And how do we as human beings make that decision? And what he found through his research was, we make an economic decision. Got to get a return on my investment of time. And if I did, then I'll continue to devote more of my time to that, source of information. So you want to be that for the sellers, to say, it's worthwhile every time you interact with them. There's something in it for them.
Very cool. Very good. I know that in your latest book, Sell Without Selling, you mentioned within the book there are some key questions that you outline, and I call them key questions because they're key questions that we should ask. We call them prospects for the time being because they haven't bought. What are some of the key questions that you would recommend when you're having a sales conversation, whether it be face-to-face or online or whatever the scenario? But what would be some of the really, whether it be just thought-provoking or anything that kind of adds within the 4 pillars that you outlined and hits the marker?
Sure. Well, in the chapter on the curiosity pillars, I have 6 types of questions that I lay out and that you can use. And the goal is that there are types of questions, right? What you want to do is take your existing questions and use these as guidelines to sort of reformat and refashion.
Yep.
But just to give you a couple examples, and one, that type of question I really love is what I call an impact question, which is you're asking the buyer to basically quantify the impact of making a change or not making a change. So it's a way of asking a question, again, is going to cause the buyer to stop and think. So, you might say, look, as a seller, you might want to pitch this idea that you have this capability called XYZ, and we can do XYZ. Well, you could say that, or what you could ask instead is, interesting. So what would the impact be on your, let's say, your revenue? What would the impact be on your revenue if you could do XYZ? So you just take that sort of simple question, statement of fact that you would have made before, you turn it into a question, and you're asking people to quantify what the impact would be. And you might say, well, what would the impact be on your company? Oh, okay, interesting. Well, so tell me, what would the impact be on your team if you could do X, Y, Z? And then you take it down to the final, you layer it. Organization, team, person. What would the impact be for you personally if you could do X, Y, Z? What would that mean for your day-to-day job? Or what would that mean? And so when you throw in this word, what would the impact be? And you can associate with it, with the descriptor that's revenue or bottom line, top line, whatever is relevant to the buyer. And they have to sort of think about that, right? And when they start thinking about it, then this idea of making a change starts becoming a little more real to them. And it's just a great way to sort of start a conversation, and at various points of conversation, keep people thinking in very real terms about what the impact of a change is. So that's one example, very simple people to use. And you can take your existing questions, like I said, and sort of reformulate them, as I mentioned, using the impact. Another type of question that's a great conversation starter is what I call an insight question, where you're going to ask a buyer something about their business prospect, something about their business that they might reasonably be expected to know, but probably don't. And what you do is you're going to get this from talking to your existing customers that are using your products or services, and you're going to find out where they're really extracting the value from using your product and service. And a lot of times it's not intuitively obvious. If you spend any amount of time going back and talking to your customers after they've used your service or used your product, you'll find that actually their use case may be quite unique, maybe different than what you sold for them. So you aggregate those insights you get from your buyers, and then you can turn those into questions for customers. In my case, when I was a consultant, I'm always focused on sales effectiveness. And so I would ask a CEO very typically, so tell me, so how many selling hours does it take to move a prospect from initial point of contact to close?
Right.
Not days, not weeks. Tell me how many selling hours it takes. They don't know. I've never had a single CEO answer that question. They should know. Absolutely should know. But what it does, so that type of question, is that the person asking goes, oh, well, what am I missing? Why don't I know that? Why is this important? Right? Tell me more about that. Let's talk about it. So it's a conversation trigger for sure.
That's cool. I love that. So very good. I always find, it's interesting because I suppose asking intelligent questions, thought-provoking questions that gets, as you mentioned, gets the buyer to think, gets them to really get them to gain perspective, right, of their position. And I suppose it helps them to it kind of persuades themselves that actually, do you know what? I'm realizing that I've got a big problem and maybe you can help me, right?
Well, yeah, to some degree, sure. Is what you're doing is you're having people visualize, right? When you ask an impact question, you're visualizing, asking them to visualize what the impact of that change is in really concrete terms. And yeah, it's a problem that so many sellers have is this speak in generalities. Well, generalities don't help buyers make decisions. Specifics do. So if I'm asking what the impact on your revenue would be if you could make, XYZ change, you're gonna have to think about that. Well, he said, oh, maybe, yeah, it'll be a 5% growth. Great. Well, let's talk about that. This 5%, is that significant for you? Is that worth the investment? We're going to start digging into that. What would the business case be to make this, pay off for you? Just opens the door to a lot further, deeper discussion.
Yep. Love it. Very good. Now, interestingly enough, I know that quite a few, there's listeners in on the podcast that have developed online businesses, because that is very much in vogue on Vogue. And I suppose you've also got digital nomads being able to work wherever they want, whenever they want, wherever they want in the world, which is kind of cool. In terms of being able to,
like in Sweden, for instance.
Exactly. There you go. or in my case, sometimes I'll be in Cyprus, or I'll be in the UK, or whatever it might be. But I'd love to know more about what you recommend from a I don't know if it would be questions as such, but what would you recommend in terms of the sales process with regards to building relationships when someone has maybe opted in, say, to a ebook or a lead magnet or whatever it is, and nurturing that relationship over time? What do you recommend for some of our listeners from a sales automation perspective? Because again, I suppose you've heard of the concept of people hate to be sold to, but they love to buy. And so I'd love to know more about kind of your thoughts behind the whole kind of, online touch points and the automation side of stuff. What are some of the things that we need to put within that automation, potentially, depending on what the customer journey looks like?
Well, I would sort of start at the beginning and sort of rethink the assumption that it's going to be an automated type outreach. I mean, I think that the great platform for people to form connections and have conversations is LinkedIn.
Yep.
Full stop.
Agreed.
And so if you're a salesperson, if you're a business owner, you have to really look and say, okay, what's my strategy? What's my strategy for connecting with my target audience on LinkedIn and influencing them to some degree about what I do? And that starts with being a creator on LinkedIn, being a content creator, posting on a consistent basis, building your audience, building your brand on LinkedIn, your personal brand. Or sometimes companies have successfully built their corporate brands on LinkedIn. This is how you do it. I mean, this is a much more effective way. I don't know if you know Tim Hughes, a UK-based expert on social selling. And he was saying, hey, you have to imagine what if he said, what if I told you I was going to come to your house every day and pick you up and drive you to a place where there are hundreds of thousands of your customers, and all you had to do is have conversations. Wouldn't that be interesting to you? And it's like, of course it'd be, right? Well, that's what LinkedIn is. So there's this temptation to say, yeah, we just, we need to have this automated, our marketing stack and our sales stack. And there's certainly things in there that are important. But first and foremost, think about what's your strategy on LinkedIn to reach out and connect, start having conversations with your buyers. Your ICP is putting out content that brings you to their attention, that causes them to reach out and want to engage with you. LinkedIn is the place to do that. So that's really should be the focus. And there's numerous resources available online. I mentioned Tim Hughes wrote a great book on social selling, and others that can start walking you through that.
Love it.
And it's a place to have real human conversations.
I know that you're pretty active on LinkedIn. I know we're connected on LinkedIn recently. And I mean, how many, just out of curiosity, how often are you on LinkedIn, just out of curiosity?
Better questions. When am I not on LinkedIn? So no, I post once or twice a day on LinkedIn, which is about what you should be doing if you're building your audience. We've sort of been consistently at this for about 7 years now, building the audience. We're up close to 200,000 followers. We have a fairly engaged following, but there are some people do it much better even than I do. And it's really, I think, a core proficiency. I think if you're an individual salesperson listening to this is how you connect with your buyers. This is where you're going to find your buyers. This is a place to be yourself, bring yourself to the game. We know from studies that 82% of buyers look at a seller's LinkedIn profile before they speak with them for the first time. That's high enough. You just assume it's 100%, right? So when they go to your profile, what are they seeing? Right? Who are you? Yep. What do you care about? What do you talk about? What do you write about? What do you like? What do you not like? Who are you following? What are you commenting on? These are all, it is a human business we're in, and people want to know who they're dealing with. And if I go to somebody's LinkedIn profile and they've contacted me and I'm looking at who they are and they've got 600 followers and they never post original content, it's like, I'm not even sure. To me, that's almost smacks of a fake account. Though I know, the vast majority of people on LinkedIn, that's exactly what their profiles look like. It's 1% of people on LinkedIn of the 500 million or however 600 million that are on it. I think the stats roughly break down that 1% are creators, 9% sort of engage with the content, and 90% are just lurkers. Break out of the mold. Don't be a lurker. Be somebody that stands out, because ultimately buyers make decisions to purchase, as I said before, based on their experience with you, dealing with you as the human seller, and amplify that experience. And LinkedIn's a great way to do that.
Do you post on weekends as well, by the way?
On occasion. But I tend to create a lot of content ahead of time, and then we schedule some of it, so it gets there are tools you can use that post stuff automatically. And so we use some of that, because I sort of work on a process where I create in bulk, let's say, and then every week, basically, I devote part of actually I do it on weekends. Part of a weekend I write my LinkedIn content for the coming week, and then I'll do some more spontaneous posting what's happening or something I've seen. But sort of once, twice a day, and there's a real pattern to the type of content you produce. You want to vary it up, and there's an art to writing for LinkedIn. So it's another reason people need to get engaged is you need to find out and experiment. Just like in sales, when you're talking to somebody face to face, and I talked about early in my career, I went out and experimented a lot to see how I could connect with people, I could engage their interest, how could I make myself interesting to them to get them to agree to invest their time in me. You do the same on LinkedIn. And if you're posting and no one's engaging with it, then there's lots of courses you can teach you how to write more effectively on LinkedIn. Invest $100, $200, take one, and then track, are people paying attention to what you're writing?
I think that's one of the things that I love about you, is the fact that you're not afraid of experimentation. And I feel like a lot of people, they give up too easily. Do you know what I mean, Andy? It's like, oh, no one's reading my post, no one's engaging with me, no one's and so people are so, I feel like some people are so they go after vanity metrics rather than kind of the real engagement, the real kind of meat on the bone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, but if you're going to invest the time to post stuff on LinkedIn, then invest the time, do it right, so that it gets exposed to people that want to read it, and you start engaging conversations that lead to more people wanting to hear what you have to say, and hopefully some of those are clients. It's like, just don't do something because you're supposed to do it and do it well. And I'm always amazed, because I'm, as you mentioned before, I have a podcast of my own, close to 1,100 episodes. I interview a lot of authors and creators on the show as well. And someone would come on the show and it's like they've written a book, and I'll go on Amazon and they've got 6 reviews. It's like, well, why are you doing that if you only want to get 6 reviews? If you go to the effort of writing something, don't you want people to see it? I mean, that's sort of, I think, what separates it sort of vanity. I think if you're just posting it out there and you don't care whether anybody reads or not, to me, that seems vain. If you think you have something to share, then yeah, go to the effort to perfect the craft that comes with creating that content, or craft of engaging with people and get people to see what you've done. If you've made this contribution to the world, don't you want people to see it?
Very good. Love it. Very cool. Interestingly enough, I was going to say to you, sales scripts. I know we haven't really spoken about sales scripts at all, but are you a big fan of sales scripts? Do they work? When should they be used? Things like that. And, you know, the only reason I ask is because I know that a lot of fast growing businesses, they like to try to find ways to systemize and, you know, to create training tools or training videos to make their team more efficient, etc. But what's your take on sales scripts? Do you feel they work? Do you feel there needs to be a time and a place? What's your thoughts on that? And what is a good sales script these days?
Well, the last one's not a question that can be answered. I think that yeah, I'll give the examples. You know, you may, I don't know, maybe you go on YouTube and you're looking at somebody that's giving a talk, or it may have been recently somewhere where, you know, a keynote speaker gave an address,
right?
And you found it particularly engaging and interesting. Well, the fact is that person wrote that script, that speech out word for word and memorized it. And so it's scripted, but didn't feel like it was scripted. Right. So the scripts that people object to when sellers feel scripted is those who are just reading the scripts, right? They haven't memorized it. They haven't practiced it and done it. So it's so fluent and fluid in the way presented that it seems spontaneous. And that's, you know, to some degree or another, you know, if you've had 10 years of experience in sales, chances are you do certain things the same way you've been doing them for quite a while, you know, given you may have changed and so on. But you're basically following your internal script. You know, you're doing things you've done before. You've said things the way you've said them before, but they've become second nature. And so the harm, I think, is when people complain about sellers being scripted, it's like, when it's clearly obvious the person's reading the words, and yeah, then yeah, scripted is bad. But it doesn't mean scripts are bad. It's just that people need to learn them. They need to experiment with them, again, as I keep saying, and experiment with you, what's going to work for you and your personality and your individuality. And you may adapt it, excuse me, but you know, you're still sort of following a script. And so again, the problem's not the scripts, it's how they're presented, how they're used. So people need to be given opportunities to practice. You need to give sellers the mandate to memorize it. And it's the difference between, you know, if you want to watch a movie where the actors are acting, having memorized the lines, or if they're standing there in front of the TV camera reading their scripts, it would come off very differently.
Some good points there. Love it, love it, love it. Now, I know that we're coming towards the end of our interview and stuff, but listen, I know that we could be speaking about sales for hours on end, and but we don't have hours on end, unfortunately, ladies and gents.
Right.
But listen, I'd love to know what you're working on, because I know that you've been working in the arena of sales for so long. I guess my question that really kind of came to my head is, what, you know, in the next 10 to 15 years from now, you know, what is it that you want to be known for? What is it? Where is it all leading to? Is there something that is going to be like the big kind of legacy piece for Andy? I'd love to know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I think this last book is the legacy piece, Sell Without Selling Out. Wrote it because as a profession, we just haven't been getting better at this job. And we've been trying to lean into technology to take the place of what we as humans should be doing. And at the end of the day, people buy from people. People make decisions to buy from people based on their experience working with that person as a human being. Is how do you be more human as a seller? How do you create these positive buying experiences for your prospects and your buyers? And yeah, I think it's going to become more important as more automation continues to spill into sales and into buying. The human piece becomes a greater differentiator, not a lesser differentiator, excuse me. So the ability to master the sort of core human skills and able to connect with someone to really understand what's important to them and help them get that. Yeah, I think that's alongside what's going to happen with all the, let's say, increased use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation. The way you can stand out as a human is going to be the key to your success.
Love it. Some very good stuff. And that's beautifully wrapped us up for today. Guys, hope that you've been enjoying myself and Andy's conversations. And I hope that you've got a ton of notes, because I certainly have been writing ferociously with my notebook and pen. And I've definitely got lots and lots of golden nuggets from today. So I hope that you've enjoyed today. Andy, I just want to say thanks so much for being here on the show today. And I really appreciate your time.
Adam, thank you for having me on, and enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Very cool. Thank you. And for you guys that are interested in connecting with Andy, please do connect with him on LinkedIn, as he said.
Yes.
But also what I was going to say is please also check out his book on Amazon. I believe Amazon.com is probably the best place to go check out his book, Sell Without Selling. And you can look at all the amazing reviews that he's already received. And also, when you do reach out to Andy, if you do want to mention the podcast, and they can kind of put two and two together. And I'm sure that in due time, himself or one of his team will get back to you in due time. So listen, guys, hope that you've enjoyed today's conversations with me and myself and Andy. And we wish you a great day whenever you are in the world. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Cheers now. Hey guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I would love to hear from you guys. Please do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to this channel, and click on the notification bell button below so that you don't miss out on some of the episodes that we've got coming up. Also, please make a comment in the comment section below. We are reaching out to some of our listeners so that we can get an understanding about how we can personalize some of the great content that we got coming out based on your needs and aspirations. My other word of advice as well is to go to our amazing Facebook community where you can meet other creative entrepreneurs and business owners. Introduce yourself, say hi, mention about some of the amazing breakthroughs that you're getting through some of the episodes, and network, right? Grow your business. You are with who you become with the 5 most common people you hang around with. So listen, guys, hope you enjoyed today's episode. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care and see you soon. Bye-bye.